Hello, welcome to another episode of Colivers Club by Melon. I'm Ramon, she's Sole, and today we are interviewing the inventor of the word digital nomad, Daniel Schlagwein.
Daniel is a professor in the University of Sydney, and he has been studying digital nomads for some years now. So he is trying to make this more understandable for different companies and governments, and try to help with also creating the digital nomad visas around the world. So he's a really interesting person to know and learn from.
Hope you enjoy. See you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Colivers Club from Melon. Today we have Daniel from Digital Nomadism. Daniel has been studying digital nomads since a long time, and he's gonna tell us about his point of view and what he thinks about this new world of remote working. So please, Daniel, thank you for being here. Could you introduce a bit of?
Thanks for having me. So I'm Daniel Schlagwein. I'm a professor at the University of Sydney, and I have been studying digital nomadism before the beginning, before we called it digital nomadism, partially because I did my own world trip and doing programming and writing a travel blog in 2006-7, and then did my PhD out of Bangkok in 2009 to 2011. Realized there are other people like us, and started to interview them in 2010. There wasn't really a name for it. There was terminology around travel blogging at that time. Later on, we called it location independent. I wrote a paper very early 2011-12, I think, the beachlancers of Thailand. At some point, I suggested the term digital nomadism. So digital nomad is not my term, but digital nomadism, I would think, is from me. And as an academic, I have been studying it then since 2011. At the moment, thankfully supported by ASEAN and the Australian government via a discovery project. And I'm working on this with a couple of colleagues and PhD students. And as you know, it has been growing. It is a thing, definitely. In the beginning, I got the reviewers don't believe in the existence of the phenomenon. I say, well, yeah, I'm just early, but it is surely there, and it's surely an important and interesting phenomenon. And then, of course, it has been growing pre-COVID, and then I guess with the work from home experience, everybody woke up to the idea. Wait a second, everybody that told me I can't do my job remotely changed their mind within 2 weeks. So now a lot of more people are aware of that exists, aware that they can do it with their own life. And I think also the general acceptance of the model also with clients and employers has gone up. So yeah, that's kind of the grand overview of it. So essentially studying digital nomadism, both the nomads, but also everybody else impacted, including the local communities, such as here, Chiang Mai. We just published a paper on Chiang Mai and the impacts that digital nomadism has on the community and what they should do about it in terms of strategies and visa policies and so forth. And everybody else, such as your businesses and platforms that are catering to nomads, nation states. What do we have to do in terms of taxes, regulation, and companies? What is the perfect hybrid model, work from anywhere policy? So these are the kinds of things that we are looking at.
So around you have been 10 years on all of this, and wow, that's pretty impressive. Thank you for saying that. So as you mentioned before, do you think this is a trend that is getting bigger and bigger? But do you think it's something that is gonna cease to end, or is something that has come to stay forever?
I guess it's the new backpacking. I would say it's backpacking plus working. No, it's definitely here to stay. So there are people have asked, is this going to be a super niche phenomenon forever? Nobody knows the future, right? So we don't know what's going to happen, but it's certainly in a massive growth phase and has been. So I guess when I started looking at it, digital nomadism as like a social phenomenon in a certain sense didn't exist, because with the benefit of hindsight, I was a digital nomad, but I didn't see myself as one, because I didn't see myself as part of a cohort or a community at all. It was my weird thing that I'm doing in Egypt and Scotland and Thailand and Bali. There was no community, there was no terminology. The nomads were not aware of themselves. It was then only 2012, 2013 when the first co-working spaces opened, and then 2014-15 when the first conference series started, that really people realize, well, there is actually not even a community, more like a cohort of similar people that I guess are now what you would call like a community, or at least a recognized phenomenon. And it has been ever growing. So from individuals to maybe a few 100,000, like mid 2010s. I'm always pressed on the numbers. I would say we probably have in the magnitude of, if you're looking at, let's say, a period of a year, probably in the magnitude of 50 million digital nomads in the world. There's a World Economic Forum report out. They're estimating it at 33 million. Always the question, when you go home, are you still a nomad? Do you need to be permanently traveling? Where do you draw the boundaries? But we definitely in the tens of millions, and I think that it's still at the smaller side of how big it will eventually become. And I think it's here to stay for the foreseeable future. We don't know, if we would have predicted, I mean, not even AI tried to predict COVID. We don't know what we don't know. And if I talk to my students, I always say, look, I'm going to talk about the impact of blockchain and AI and social media and work from home COVID. And that's the four things I can tell you. And they're all really big in terms of how they have changed the world. If I'm teaching the same MBA class in 10 years, I'm going to have another four things here. I don't know what those are going to be, right? And everybody who thinks they can predict that is overstretching essentially what they can really say. So there could be wars, there could be unexpected events. Maybe we have a cultural backlash. Maybe there is something about, climate change. Is it necessary to, for no other reason than lifestyle purposes, zipping around with, airplanes and burning all that fossil fuel for no good reason? I don't know what's going to happen, but my middle of the road prediction would be yes, it is growing, and we haven't spoken about co-living yet, but I think the nomad and remote working phenomenon has gone up based on that, the co-working, and then we see other things such as co-living, conference, and other ways of how you essentially live in that lifestyle emerging.
Definitely. I want to go back to the boundary section that you mentioned. You say that it depends on which is defining those boundaries. The number is below or higher to a certain number. What are the boundaries for you? What defines a digital nomad?
I was always pressed on that. So they said, isn't that the same as work from home? And I said, well, on some aspects, it's the same as work from home. It is a type of remote work, but in terms of the lived experience and where you're locating yourself, it's the opposite, right? Work from bedroom is the exact opposite. You're a digital hermit, you're not a digital nomad, right? If I talk about the local community that I'm impacting by being there, I live in a place called Camperdown in Sydney. So if I say local community where I'm spending my money and my time, I mean Sydney. Right here, I mean Chiang Mai. So meaning even if maybe what I'm doing on my laptop is identical, everything else in my work life is completely different. So I would say digital nomadism is not a synonym for telework or remote work or work from home or digital work. It's specifically digitally or mobile working in an international frame of reference. So I'm going to different countries. I'm living in a semi-nomadic, very highly mobile. I would even say that within the same country, so if I have a place in the countryside and go out of the city to work from there, as my friend Andrew likes to do, but I say, yeah, mate, you're not really a digital nomad then. And the kind of hashtag van life is a borderline case, but I think to me the ideal type, where I have no doubt that this is a digital nomad, would need to involve not having a home base and moving in an international frame of reference.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much for those.
You're getting academic answers, I know.
What do you think of co-livings for digital nomads and remote workers? And have you been to any of those?
Yeah, we are in one right now. Alt Ping River, new location of Alt, which is a beautiful place. So I have been in a few. I have been staying in a few. I'm not personally a co-living person, I have to say, but that's personality driven because I'm not a super social kind of, I'm very happy to go back home and have my privacy where nobody knows me, I'm a city person. But I think it is for most of digital nomad workers essentially the missing puzzle piece where effectively people have even in co-working spaces always said, okay, let's do a, go out after work, have dinner together, have co-learning event. And I think co-living is essentially almost the perfect endpoint of that, where you say, okay, my whole everything that I want to do and I want to probably do with people like me and people who are also traveling and talking about digital work, cryptocurrency, social media, AI, future of work, marketing, influence, whatever. I want to spend my time with those people, and it would be nice if I can just go downstairs to my meeting and my friends. And so I think it is the logical endpoint. It is, and we spoke about that earlier, it is a particular niche within digital nomads. And digital nomads is a particular type of remote digital worker. So it is probably a niche phenomenon, but again, within that niche massively growing. We spoke about it, they're probably now in the magnitude of hundreds of co-living spaces worldwide, a category that did essentially not exist 10 years ago. Right?
Definitely.
And it seems to be growing. When I came back here to Chiang Mai just after COVID was reopening, all the hotels were still closed, or I think I was the only guest literally in my hotel. But the co-working spaces, this is the second location of Alt. The first location was booked out for 3-4 months just after opening in advance. So I think it is certainly a model that in the right locations seems to be just what is needed and what people want.
Definitely. Completely agree on that. It depends a lot on the location and what the people around wants to have there. What kind of trends do you think? Yesterday, for example, we were at this convention and they were mentioning about the new visa for Thailand, specifically for digital nomads. So, what regarding this kind of trends, what other things do you think we are gonna have in the next years?
So what you mentioned, the event was essentially the first digital nomads week organized by Tourist Authority of Thailand in Chiang Mai, and I was giving the opening talk on essentially digital nomadism in Chiang Mai and the launch of the digital nomad visa of Thailand, which is something that has been 5 years in the making essentially. But I think that is one big change since 2020, since I would count the Estonian visa as the first digital nomad visa, that there is a legal and regulatory basis for it. Nobody can really go out and, particularly not the Tourist Authority of Thailand, cannot market Thailand as a destination for digital nomads if digital nomads are technically illegally working on a tourist visa, which, there is a tension there. So I think to have at least a visa in place, it is great to have. So, and you have been following this space, that lots of countries have been launching or announcing. Japan, Italy, Portugal, Sri Lanka, Malaysia, lots of countries have been launching digital nomad visas. So that's one trend that we have been seeing, that countries are taking it serious. And then I guess the next logical step will be almost like this field race to the bottom, that our countries are now actually competing in the same way, same as with global corporate taxes, what the Amazons of the world have been doing. Also, if you make it too hard, we go to Ireland with our headquarters. The knowledge worker can do now as well. You go to the place that makes it easier for you. And then one is public sector visa regulation, acceptability of the nomadic model, and service provider like you, which essentially are taking care of, I like to call it organization as a service, where typically I call my whatever accounting or marketing department in my university if I need this and this done, for nomads, which are in many cases their own businesses, freelancers, businesses of one. Of course, they're employees, but many are small businesses, and essentially you're having then all the business functions and also all the travel functions, finding a co-living space. We spoke to this other company the other day where they are essentially helping to find the right insurances and visa arrangements. So there's a whole ecosystem string of services like yours, where essentially it's almost the reverse. Instead of that you have a company and then lots of employees are organized around the company, you have that one nomad and it's centered on that person and they're puzzling together their own organization around them. So from an organizational theory perspective, that's quite interesting because it's not many individuals following one particular corporate model, but it's each individual builds their own micro-organization, we call it. So I thought this is purely from I'm also a teacher in a business school, and I think this is an interesting development that's happening there. The other things that I predict will be happening, and we spoke about that earlier in our conversation, is what is next after co-working, co-living, and I think to having something like co-villages or co-communities, the beach, the digital nomads version, right? The beach with laptop. I think it's going to be even more niche, but I think that's going to emerge, particular because the digital nomad lifestyle, it's the whole reason to engage in that is because you want to make the travel experience, right? If you just want to work remotely, you can do that from your local co-working space or local coffee shop. You don't need to go around the world. So you do it for the travel experience. And then it seems to be logical that you're extending it from purely the 9 to 5 work time to the 24-hour period, and then that you move the location of these places to this kind of, bit of a hassle to go to, but actually awesome as a travel destination, surfing spots or what skiing spots. So that's something that we're still trying to figure out. What is the perfect digital nomad destination? Where do they actually like to go? Because it seems to be remote, but not too remote, and you need to have a certain level of infrastructure there. And of course, you also want to have a variety. So people are there seems to be some common themes in digital nomad locations. When I go to Chiang Mai, if I squint my eyes, it looks a little bit like Medellin, a city very green in the mountains, moderate climate. So there seem to be some commonalities between these destinations. And I think if the nomads are figuring out where those sweet spots are, I would expect that there are this co-living or maybe even co-village arrangements popping up. And they already do in places where nomads like to go.
Cool. Thank you very much. Yeah, I think I definitely agree with the co-village. We were talking it before that in some places of Spain, particularly in the north, it's already happening, and looks like a trend that is going to happen more in the future.
Yeah.
Managing a co-living has never been easy. That's why we created MangoBeds, the first software made for co-living owners by co-living owners. We have worked with a lot of co-living spaces to create the best tool for managing bookings, guests, and finances. With MangoBeds, you can manage bookings, customize forms inside your website or with a link. And you can also promote longer stays with just a few clicks. Sync your availability with external platforms to avoid double bookings. You can also automate emails to remind guests of their stay, to join the co-living channel, or to just leave a review, saving your time for what really matters. Start your free trial today and choose from simple pricing plans that suit your needs. There are no commissions or hidden fees. So get started with MangoBets now and simplify your co-living management. So another topic that we find sometimes interesting is like regarding mental health for digital nomads. It's hard to balance the work and life. So what have you found out about the downsides of this aspect?
Yeah, so there's the front Instagram story, and then there's the backstory to digital nomadism. It can be lonely, so I know a lot of people would experience some sort of loneliness, stress, and I guess my worry is if people are dropping off the radar in a conventional family, local community, colleagues kind of setting, people will notice, right? With digital nomads, there have been cases where people just dropped off the radar and essentially, oh, that fun guy doesn't show up in the co-working space anymore. Yeah, well, nice to be around. So there is certainly an element of, how much of this kind of things we don't know. It's very difficult to find out about that, but there is certainly, most of the nomads would immediately react to questions of, depression, being overwhelmed, anxiety, And so that's something that is a potential downside of the lifestyle, because maybe the safety net is not as tight for people like that. People would not get the support. And then, of course, there's other downsides which are affecting others in the community. So I'm looking at digital nomads also from the perspective of each individual community. So what does it do from the perspective of the Colombians, from the perspective of the Balinese, from the perspective of the Thai? And there could be all kinds of, from cultural misunderstanding, like how you as a European would think about LGBTQI might not be the same in Indonesia, which is a Muslim majority country, and so forth. So, the cultural differences, the economic differences, and then all the effects that you're getting from that, including, people being priced out, please make space because I want to run an Airbnb here because these guys are paying 3 times more than, the Portuguese pensioner in the old town. It's gentrification, of course, as a business school professor, it's a good thing in the sense of that it is a sign of, economic progress. But on social ground, it is a very questionable thing because there's always a group that loses out in these elements. And that's something we're also interested in. So the kind of the non-sales pitch to digital nomadism. So what are the negative impacts that you have, both as a nomad in terms of mental health, ability to really establish a community, build a family, these kind of questions, as well as what does it do to the others. That doesn't mean that just because there are downsides, it's not overall a great thing, but I think people should be aware of that because, conflicts with the locals and mental health concerns are not typically what you see in the YouTube advertisements where people are pitching their how to get rich quick courses. And I think, the audience and people in general should be aware that there are, and we are looking at that as part of the research.
Okay, thank you very much. Definitely, they should be aware. Like, you see them first on Instagram, and then the reality is completely different. Definitely. Let us know a bit more on how our guests can find you, like on social media or your website or all of that.
Yeah, so I'm probably the last generation that gets away without social media. So I don't really don't really use social media. I think you can find me. You can post my last name.
Of course, we will add it.
Schlagwein.